Hi everybody. I'm so glad to be here today with you. And my talk is going around navigate service design beyond the design sea. And just to double check that everybody knows my name, hola, soy Nia. Thank you for the warm welcome, Ishida. And currently, I'm taking this call from Lima, Peru. I'm a product design lead at Continuum HQ, a design firm with a focus on making Latin America become a hub of innovation and technology business. Today, we lead the development of products and services in banking, future of work, and health. I have more than 10 years living in the intersection of customer experience, design, and operations in fields like education, NGOs, fashion, tourism, and finally, innovation. I've explored these fields as a UX UI designer, service designer, design ops lead, and now as a product lead. And when the amazing opportunity to be here came up, I started to think that infamous question of what would you say to your younger self, the younger Nia, as a recommendations to thrive in the design and service design industry. And after a few coffees and AM walks for a couple of days listening to Bad Bunny, I came up with three elements that kept me thriving, connecting, and building relationships with people that do not have the so called label of designers, but are key for me for my role to be successful. Those three things allow me to go from living in a design bubble all by myself and go from generating chaos and tensions with my stakeholders or other companies' areas kind of looking like this to finally have the "We Are All in This Together" song as soundtrack most of the time. And just to begin, the first reflection that I had it was that as a matryoshka, service design is nested design. This, in the sense that service design will require us to go beyond the mentality of focusing on the final or internal user that compounds a service blueprint or a journey map. We gotta keep in mind that the service blueprint also has another user taken in consideration. Those are the stakeholders that might be the ones approving or disapproving organizational changes and bureaucratic stuff to make your design and proposal real. And if that is the case, and we all can agree with it, this is very relevant. We should not forget that stakeholders are still users, and we must be as user centric as we will be with our final user. And this is key to understand because to be part of the team, we gotta be the team. We got to understand and keep the same idea with the user that our product will be ready when our user needs are 100% satisfied. But given that the only constant is change, this has a direct impact in user needs. They will be constantly changing. Same happens with the needs of our stakeholders. That's why it doesn't matter how much protocolar and formal information you will receive in your company's onboarding. You better rely on two elements that are essential in design. First one is active listening. The second one is curiosity. And actually, Maria used a picture that I really like. And it will lead us to an analogy of this classic service design picture where we distinguish between front and backstage and behind the scenes. And as important to understand backstage and the behind the scenes in the journey is, it is important for us to understand strategy, the evolving strategy we are crafting and pushing forward in the company, but also the people behind the strategy. And this is when we will activate much more our user centric perspective, try to understand who are they, what keeps them awake at night, what are their hopes. And all of these can be reliable following research through one-on-one virtual coffees that you might have with them, for example, or even desktop research through our strategic plans or other documentation that you might find can be helpful to understand their perspective. And with that, keep it constantly in mind because that will lead you to the next powerful move. And that is that service design is a film, not just a frame or a picture. Service design gives us the superpower of figure things out. Double click and zoom on how unfolds over time. And basically feel that thought editing, we don't just paste things, but we make them gracefully flow. We as service designers or designers that use service design tools can be the ally who connect the dots that unleash and empower connections. And it is basically that we have access to the matrix and we can push forward to give it much more sense to become a trilogy and stay relevant through time, just like Matrix and Keanu Reeves. All the information you are gathering in the previous point, it will be meaningful if you are able to develop and foster connections. Not to only be another repository of info, but that can walk, not just to be informed. So here are two questions that should trigger possible actions in you. The first one is, how can you elevate connections in the organization? And the second one is, how can you decentralize connections? Meaning that how can you, with all the visibility that you just gained with information and even with all your day-by-day activities, can create a pollination of those connections in other areas to stop being silos. And what I would suggest here to tackle is related with this reference. Probably some of us have heard about Normandy because of our history classes, or because we watched Dunkirk by the great Christopher Nolan, and where our truly Harry Styles cast as well. But the reason why I bring this reference is because we need to find our beachhead. That person, that area that can make us gain more traction within people that are non-designers. And a beachhead market aims to start small but with ambition. A small market as a starting point to build our strengths and market positioning to grow, but which little by little prepare us to capture adjacent markets. This market has specific characteristics that make it an ideal market to sell a new product or service. And in our case, a new mindset and approach for the organization. Now, I will leave you with this reflection. With all the info you have empathized for your organization, who could be your beachhead market? Or even if we want for this to sound friendlier, who could be your beachhead ally? And that connects with my last reflection. The actions we take through service design basically is like going through an MRI. We will have a very detailed picture with batch structure that will allow us to assess the organization, the process, the product, the service. And actually, what service design is going to do is going to reveal things that are missing. And that leads us to our third point. And that's how we can look out for service design tools as power-ups. Use them to cover gaps, reduce risk, or have a 2.0 version of what we have by now in our organization. And having this positive approach will allow us to avoid an organization generating antibodies to the methodology or to the project. Whereas if you frame it as I have something that could boost your process, it is much friendlier and could get you better buy-in. Now, for example, let's focus on our blueprints. A blueprint beyond mapping channels, artifacts, journeys, etc., can bring you 3 benefits to pitch to your stakeholders. First one, it's documentation. And we probably know and we'll probably agree how painful documentation can be and how bad the famous buzz factor could be, where if someone gets involved in an accident or in vacations or holidays, how much information will be unavailable just because that person will be out of the office. Make this a short-term goal for your stakeholders, a short-term benefit, where you can power up documentation of process, strategy, etc., to the organization and improve their way of work now more than ever when we are living asynchronous and remote work. A second benefit is that depending on the gaps we might find with our tool, we can extrapolate and predict customer feedback because we're mapping the pains of the user in our blueprint as is maybe. This becomes accurate to give proactive heads up and consolidate quick wins until we buy time and buy in to develop a more realistic strategy from the organization. This becomes a midterm goal and impact for sure. That leads us to the third one, which is future strategy. And this focuses on how we can push for a sustainable strategy that can fill up the blanks that we are already finding. This becomes for sure a long term goal to be realistic. And that's why this approach is ideal to look it up and leave a trace of it because most likely we will have restrictions of time, effort, and budget until we consider consolidate more buy-in of our stakeholders. An example of this could be with bold moves towards the user, the final user, or even to question and rethink things inside the organization. And it takes time to move the big white elephant in the room. So be patient with this. At the end, keep track of these three elements. That do not forget that there are still users. Be as user-centric as you'll be with your final user. Be the ally who connect the dots, unleash and empower connections. And lastly, service design tools as power-ups. Use them to cover gaps, reduce risk, or have a 2.0 version of what you have by now in your organizations. Think of all of these just like a massive puzzle, where it's much better to involve people and co-create change in that way that they will feel that are being heard, taken in count and in consideration. And with that, we will be able to hopefully say we're all in this together, son, as the initial soundtrack of this talk. Most of the time, as I said. Thank you. Here are my contact info. If by any chance you want to keep this chat in LinkedIn, or maybe if you want to have like a virtual coffee with me. Thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Nia. That was such an interactive presentation, and of course, we all are in together here. I really appreciate you giving us a talk today. I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation, and I am sure all of our audience have also done. You have inspired so many of us today. I'll connect back again with you for the question answer round at the end. Our third speaker is Matia.